I'm playing against an opponent whose rating is 2300 on Lichess, and he's a young boy, so you have to be very alert against such opponents. I opened the game with d4, he goes knight f6, c4, e6. Should I allow the Nimzo Indian? Yes, I do. Bishop to b4 and the e3 Rubinstein variation on the board. c5 played by my opponent. Knight ge2. That's a nice move. Now the best line here is to take on d4, but he goes knight c6. This is not a good move because after a3 he has to give up his bishop. If he goes bishop a5, I simply take the pawn on c5. So he took, knight takes, and now I have the bishop pair in the position. White is better. Pawn takes, and d5 played by my opponent. Good move. c5 played instantly. In fact, this is the best move in the position, castles. And now is the key moment of the game, because black intends to play e5. A good move here is bishop b5, putting pressure on this knight and preparing castling. What I thought is that I can put my bishop on g5, pinning this knight, so that after e5, d5 pawn would be weak. And that's the reason why my idea here was to play bishop g5. You can see that I'm taking my time because I have the bishop pair in the position. I am slightly better and I go bishop g5. Now e5 would have been a great move for black, because after takes, knight d5, yes, white wins a pawn, but queen e6, black has compensation. He goes rook e8, which is not a bad move. He is intending e5, and so black, if he gets e5 in this position, he would have compensation for not having the bishop pair. But if he does not get e5 in the position, then white would not only have the bishop pair, he would also have space and everything in his control. So I play bishop e2, thinking that my opponent will eventually go for e5 sooner or later. Also at the same time, this point d5 is under pressure if you play e5 because of this pin here. But you know, sometimes in chess you have to take the risky path, because the riskiest path is playing it safe, which is what black does here. Now e5 was very important. Takes d4 and then accepting these doubled pawns, breaking pawns, and threat is d3, also rook takes c5. This was the way to move forward, but my opponent here is not ready to take the risk. He thinks that he can play a simple move like bishop d7 and get away with it, but that is not how it works. And after castles, now you will see that white is totally in control of things. I'm also very focused because I know my opponent is a very strong player. Rook to c8, and there you see there's a big weakness on d6 square, and I go for it. Knight to b5, good move. The knight is coming into d6 here. What does black do now? Black is under huge pressure, but my opponent wriggles out of this pretty interestingly. Try to think, how would you stop knight d6? Yes, you can play knight e4 to stop it, but then you will lose your queen on d8. So what do? You have to break that pin. Also on time, I'm doing really well right now. g5, good move by my opponent. I move my bishop back, and now the knight is no longer pinned, and so a very good move is knight to e4. Here the best way for white to play is knight d6. I thought about it because after takes, I have space and bishop pair, but I was afraid of this move queen f6. But white has a very powerful move here. Can you find it? It is bishop b5, pinning the knight and keeping control. And now with f4 coming up, white is going to be in big advantage here. But because I did not see this move bishop b5, I was afraid about this entire idea that my d4 pawn would be weak. And so you can see me taking time here and figuring out what to play. Even a move like f3 was what I thought, but after knight takes g3, h takes g3 and queen f6, I did not like the fact that, okay, I can win an exchange here, but I would lose the crucial pawn on d4. So that's the reason why my next move, I have taken close to a minute on the clock and played bishop to d3. Very interesting, very interesting. My opponent should have played a6 here, which was the best move, kicking this knight away before. And if I take here to take on b5, but instead he took on g3, and this was my idea, to take with the f pawn so that the rook opens up here, the knight is coming in, the bishop is well placed, and the queen can enter. Wow, this is opening up very well, and f5 was the best move here, but instead my opponent goes rook e7. This is passive. The knight jumps in, the rook on c8 is hanging, and now rook, his idea is to keep material equality, but he's in big trouble now. I am thinking very seriously about sacrificing on f7, like, you know, take here, take here, take here, and then queen h5, but it doesn't work because here black is able to defend. So the best move in this position is rook to f6. It's an excellent move in the position, and now queen h5 here would have been such a powerful move, because after takes, queen h6 is a checkmate. But instead, I should have gone rook f6 here. Basic idea of rook f6 is to block the f pawn from moving forward. But taking so much time in a 5-minute game without increment is really bad. I played queen h5, and now the best move here is f5, but he plays queen f8, and now finally rook joins in, attacking the h6 pawn, and this is all over. The game is finished because the other rook is coming in. This point is under huge pressure. Big attack boiling up, but the only problem is the time. With 1 minute 17 seconds, my opponent has 1 minute 39 seconds. It's very difficult to defend as black. There is no way that he can defend the h6 pawn. His king can't come here. The bishop is controlling. King can't come to g7 because it cuts off the queen's path. So queen g7 is a good move, because if you take with the rook, d4 pawn would hang. Well, it's still playable that way, but bringing in the other rook makes a lot of sense. Now f7 under pressure, so he brings his other rook, and now look at this boiling point. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 attacks. He has 1, 2, 3, 4 defenses. So what do? How do you bring in another piece to attack that bishop g6? You can't take the bishop because the rook is hanging here. All of my pieces are concentrated on the f7 point. Amazing. And he goes knight d8. Very passive, but hoping that he can survive this. And I really like my next move here. I saw that I can't do much, but I can open up the position with h4. And the point is that my rook can swing from here to here and attack if the g pawn goes away. And so takes, he can never touch this bishop because his rook is hanging. And he is in right now, he's completely tied up. He's completely tied up in the position. So my slow plan is to play my rook up, get my bishop out, and rook g4, winning his queen. That is what I want to do. He plays bishop to e8, and now I want to move my bishop out. Also on time, I'm ahead with 40 seconds. My opponent has 28 seconds. Rook f4, good move. And at this point, I think my opponent simply lost his patience because he was low on time, and also, as you can see, his position is completely lost. So he takes on g6. But now rook f8, queen f8, rook f8, king f8, queen h6. Materially, white is totally winning. Take on e8, rook takes e8, queen g6, king f8, queen f6, check. Knight blocks here. The h pawn is ready to move ahead. The knight cannot move. King g8, h6. And well, his time is up, but also there is a checkmate on the board. Well, Very interesting fight, but one of the reasons why my opponent was unable to hold was because he played a little too passive in the game. He had to be active at all costs.